Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA. Today, tomorrow, together.
The highly competitive 2006 ABSA Off-Road Championship Series over 8 demanding races all over Southern Africa did more than enough this year to cement its position as one of the jewels in the South African motorsport crown. ABSA also celebrated their involvement in 06.
Well, we're going into our 6th year of association with off-road sponsorship, and started off very small, but it's something that we consider to be important in the whole racing calendar. And it's given us tremendous exposure, and we consider it now to be one of the premier events in South Africa.
And how important is it to the title sponsors?
It's very important for ABSA because the motor business is our business. ABSA Vehicle and Asset Finance regards the role of the motor dealer and the manufacturer as vital and core to the business that we're in. And this is a way that ABSA then funds the opportunity to put something back into the sport.
Big fields throughout the travelling circus and close and competitive racing in all 8 events produced a season of high quality, with ABSA committing themselves to principal sponsorship in 2007, along with the sport's other partners in Ford, Nissan and Toyota. The future indeed looks rosy. However, let's take a look back at the year that was. The season opened with the Nissan Dealer 400 in Darling in the Western Cape and saw Nissan and multiple South African champion Hannes Grobler in car with his trusty navigator Francois Jordan again. They got their campaign off to a perfect start. Grobler and Jordan in the proudly South African Nissan Navara came home nearly 15 minutes ahead of the factory Ford Racing Ranger in the hands of former champions Neil Woolridge and Kenny Schalthammer to take both the overall honours and the win in the new super production class. It was also a perfect start for Woolridge and Schalthammer, who were back in action after a year-long sabbatical from the sport. It was the Ford's debut in the SP class, and after limited testing time, the Pietermaritzburg-based team were more than happy with the performance of the vehicle. Third were Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford in a second factory Nissan Navara, who started the day in pole position after a fast prologue. However, they did not have a happy day with a broken fan belt and a gearbox hampering their progress, but finished well ahead of fourth-placed Bevan Berthold and Robin Houghton in the Castrol Toyota Hilux. Berthold was making his debut in the Toyota factory team with a pair out in a Class D vehicle. It was also the perfect start for reigning Class D champs Chris Visser and Jaapie Baardhorst in the Tyco Trucks Toyota Hilux. It was their first outing in Class D and produced a steady drive to come in well ahead of Kutsiela Beskagni and Johan Gerber in the Race Sonics Nissan Hardbody. Third in Class D, it was Kobus van Tonder together with his co-driver Rian Guampa in a Mitsubishi Pajero. Unfortunately, with Hugo and Jaap de Bruin in a Castrol Toyota Hilux, Cliff and Louis Weigelt in the Bosel Toyota Hilux, and BB Auto Nissan's Yuri Duplessis and Andre Duplessis among the high-profile retirements. Class E provided Toyota with a second victory and produced a great result for Brian Martin and Oki Fourie in their Castrol Toyota Hilux. Martin was making his off-road debut and they took the class ahead of 05 Class D champions Manfred Schroeder and Ward Huxtable in the Works Ford Racing Ranger. Former track racers Fabio Tafani and Jaco Swanepoel were third and fourth in the Club Refrigeration and IDM Cement Toyota Hilux entries and came through a tough off-road baptism. On the special vehicle front, Brandon Harkes drove what he called the race of his life in the single-seater Motorrad Bat in a car he built himself. Harkes surged to victory over reigning special vehicle champions Terence Marsh and Mike Whitehouse in the blue and red Nasher Mobile Bat, and thus also took the Class A honours. In a magnificent performance, Harkes finished more than 23 minutes ahead of Marsh and Whitehouse. For their part, the Nashua combination was 10 minutes ahead of third-placed Colin Matthews and Jean Moore in the Century Property Developments Bat after steady runs from both crews. Harkes took the lead after Evan Hutchison and Hakim Bergman in the second Motorrad Bat, and Gary Berthold and Henry Costain in the Atlas Copco Bat had fallen by the wayside. The two crews set identical times in the prologue and were locked in battle until the Motorrad car went out with a broken clutch and the right rear suspension on the Atlas Copco car collapsed. A solid performance saw Bez Besaidnout and Johan de Bruin complete the top 5 and win Class B in the Adenko Sandmaster. Second in Class B were veterans Ernest Corbett and Warwick Goosen in the Century Property Bat, with Swazi crew John Thompson and Clinton McNamara third in a Zarko Light. The Class S honours went to Archie Rutherford and Craig Doubtfire in the Nashua Mobile Racing Raceco, who finished 7th overall. They took control of the class when reigning champions Richard Schilling and Chris Davies in the Plastotec Aisco went out with an engine problem. Second was the Kopanong Hotel Super Team Raceco with Nick Gosler and Richard Carolyn, while Polokwane businessman Nahim Mosaji and Nazim Moti took third in yet another Raceco. But it was the fire engine red Nissan that took the checkered flag for the production vehicles and therefore an early lead on the points table for the championship. A victory is worth 25 points and Grobler and Jordan certainly deserved every single one of them. A runner-up spot for the Ford pair, who were 15 minutes in arrears, with the Nissan taking third. Go! Marcus was in a class of his own, and that without the benefit of a Navigator 2, while the defending champions Marsh and Whitehouse were rock solid in second, 10 minutes ahead of the chasers. Round 2 of the championship moved to KwaZulu-Natal, where the Ford factory pair of Neil Woolridge and Kenny Schulthammer pulled off a major coup when they won the Nissan Sugarbelt 400, albeit in their own backyard. It was their second successive win on the event, and in the process they ended Nissan's domination of the production vehicle category. The all-new Ford Racing Ranger SP carried the former South African champions to a 3.5-minute win ahead of Hannes Grobler and Francois Jordan in the proudly South African Nissan Navara. And as always, Grobler never holds anything back. Ford's Cup then literally overflowed when reigning Class D drivers champion Manfred Schroeder, partnered by Jack Peckham, produced a magnificent performance to finish third overall and first in Class E in the Ford Racing Ranger 2.5 diesel. Fourth overall was Bevan Bertolt and Robin Houghton, who were having their first outing in the new Castrol Toyota Hilux SP class vehicle. They would improve with every outing. While Mark Corbett and Jean Moore were fifth in the Class D Century Property Development's Nissan Hardbody in the SP class. The Nissans of Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford and then Grobler and Jordan set the early pace before running into mechanical problems, while Mark Cronier and Chris Birkin in a second Castrol Toyota Hilux, also running in the SP class, went out with a blown engine. Cliff and Louis Weichelt dominated Class D in the Bosel Toyota Hilux to come in well ahead of the steady Kutsiela Wiskachny and Johan Gerber in the Raconics Nissan Hardbody. Third was Yuri and Andre Duplessis in the BB Auto Nissan Hardbody, with Nissan dealer winners Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst this time amongst the casualties. With Schroeder and Peckham dominating Class E totally, second in the category went to brothers Mark and Stuart Moffat in the Bosel Toyota Hilux, who were nearly an hour behind the Ford pair. Brian Martin and Oki Fourie picked up another good finish with third place in the Castrol Toyota Hilux. In the special vehicle category, there was a second consecutive victory for the Motorrad Bat team. This time, however, it was former quad racer Evan Hutchison and Akim Bergman who took the win to score their first overall and Class A victory. Hutchison handily won the Class B championship in 05 and just continued his good form. He and Bergman had a clean run for home and finished 11 minutes clear, and it's clear that team manager Hutchison was going hell for leather. The privateers Will Battershill and Reg Sutton came up with a tremendous result in their Jimco when they took second. Off-road motorcycle legend Alfie Cox and Henny Tersteege in a second Motorrad Bat took third place. And that was ahead of local pair Clint Gibson and Mike Brown in the Absolute Bat, with reigning SA champions Terence Marsh and Mike Whitehouse fifth in the Nasher Mobile Bat. Seventh overall and the Class S win went to reigning champions Richard Schilling and Chris Davies in the Plastotec Aisco, who had to overcome power steering problems to bounce back after a non-finish in the opening event of the season. They finished ahead of Class B winners Rudy and Pierre van Graan in the Technochair Zarco Light, who were then followed home by Class B newcomers Jan and Hendrik Kraai in the Keymax Bat and Swaziland's John Thompson and Clinton McNamara in their Zarco Light. Nick Gosler, partnered this time by George Bowie while Richard Carolyn was on an overseas trip, finished second in Class S in the Kopanong Super Team Raceco. The only other finisher in the class was local Glenn Gibson in the Absolute Raceco. this time, line honours went to the Ford stable, who were celebrating in style at the line as their charge overcame heat, treacherous roads and miles of sugar plantations. Both Woolwich and Schulthammer were SA champions on 4 and 2 wheels, and this performance gave them hope of taking on the might of the Nissan outfit, who were looking for title number 6 in as many years.
Go!
So a 4-minute margin for the Ford Ranger, but ominously there were 4 Nissans in the top 10, while the Privateers and the Toyotas scored manufacturers' points. Hutchison and Bergman celebrated an 11-minute cushion over the rest, while Marsh and Whitehouse again scored valuable points in trying to defend their championship in 5th place. After the first 2 rounds, it was a 2-horse race at the top. Grobler and Jordan in their Nissan and Fords Woolwich and Schulthammer were tied at the top with 44 points. Everyone wondered if it was going to be a classic duel again. And in the space frame vehicles, the defending champions had a slender 5-point lead over Harkus, but the Motorrad team had 2 more protagonists in the mix. The Toyota 1000 Desert Race is the only marathon event on the ABSA Off-Road Championship calendar, and again produced a combination of triumph and heartbreak. The outstanding performance of the weekend came from Hannes Grobler and Francois Jordan in the proudly South African Nissan Navara, who were again dominant in winning the production vehicle category and the SP class. For Grobler, it was his 4th Desert Race triumph and came 20 years after his first win in the Botswana event. This victory also gave Nissan their 5th successive production vehicle win in this classic race, with Grobler and Jordan having to recover from a shaky start to eventually completely dominate. And even the greatest of champions can wrong slot it every now and then, but at least a U-turn and back en route, and pretty quickly too. Most of the other challenges in the SP class had races they would like to forget, with 2nd place going to Rob Gurney and Graham Steinbach in the factory Ford Racing Ranger. But they were more than 90 minutes behind the winners. Bevan Berthold and Robin Houghton limped home in 3rd in the Castrol Toyota Hilux after front differential failure on the final section on the way in. While the SP Class Brigade ran into problems, 2 Class D crews came up with magnificent performances. Reigning Class E champions Chris Visser and Jaapie Baardnost in the Tyco Trucks Toyota Hilux was 2nd overall and 1st in Class D, and were followed home by former Class E champs Hugo and Jaap de Bruin in the Castrol Toyota Hilux, who in turn were 3rd overall and 2nd in Class D. 3rd and 4th in Class D were Mark Corbett and Jean Moore in the Century Property Development Nissan Hardbody, and Cliff and Louis Weichelt in the Bosel Toyota Hilux, with the first 4 Class D runners all up into the top 10. Manfred Schroeder and Ward Huxtable were comfortable winners in Class E in the factory Ford Racing Ranger. The KwaZulu-Natal team produced a 15-minute winning margin ahead of the Toyota Hilux pair of Jannie Visser and Yorks Leroux, who did a great job in their first outing of the season. Brian Martin and Oki Fourie in the factory Castrol Toyota Hilux rolled out of the event on day 1, but there were good performances from 2 other Toyota crews. Brothers Mark and Stuart Moffat's Bosel Toyota Hilux went well, and Fabio Tafani and his nav Mike Barron in the Club Refrigeration Toyota Hilux were 3rd and 4th. Kutsiela Beskachny and Johan Gerber in their newly repainted Race Sonics Nissan Hardbody also produced a sparkling drive. While Bevan Berthold and his co-pilot Robin Houghton had their own troubles in their Castrol Toyota Hilux in the SP class, and the body was showing it. In Class E, the Barton Tyre Services team of Thomas Rundle and Brian Roberts also soldiered on, regardless of the testing nature of the course. The special vehicle battle saw the father and son combination of Nick and Ryan Harper grind down the opposition in their new livery Dermasun Bat. For the Harpers, victory was sealed when the unfortunate Gary Berthold and Henry Costain in the yellow Atlas Copco Bat hit a tree on the final leg and were then forced to retire. And for them, it would be an up-and-down season from here on in, one which ended in penalties being dished out right at the end of the whole lot. Motorcycle legend Alfie Cox looking for an SA title number 26, and his co-Henny ter Steege and the Motorrad Bat were a solid second. With Nardus Alberts and Colin Hunter coming up with an impressive performance to take the final podium place in only their second outing in the Rapsa Bat. Next up was the consistent Brandon Harkis in the single-seater Motorrad Bat, who had his work cut out doing both the driving and navigating, but he was doing a great job. In one of the closest finishes in the event, veteran Gil Null and Johan Smallberger in the Bosel Truggy Zarko won Class B from the Besaidnots Johan and Etienne in the Adenko Bat by just 7 minutes. It was a triumphant return to Class B competition for Null, who started the season in Class A. Swazi crew John Thompson and Clinton McNamara and the Zarko Light were third again, with Class B producing no less than 3 different winners in 3 outings. In Class S, veterans Richard Schilling and Chris Davies made it 2 wins out of 3 in the Plastotech ASCO, despite completing the event without power steering. The pair were 11th overall and had around half an hour to spare over arch rivals Archie Rutherford and Craig Dartfire in the Nasho Mobile Bat. A solid performance saw Nick Gosler and Richard Carolyn take third in Class S in the Kopanang Hotel Super Team Raceco, with Naim Mosaji and Rayhun Badiana seeing out the considerable distance to finish a creditable 4th. At the sharp end of the field, though, there was no doubt that the Grobler-Jordan combination was tightening the grip on the championship, and it was a tribute to the car, its setup, and a spirited crew who brought it home for the victory. After all, 1,000 kilometers is not exactly a trot around the block, and when the corks had popped, the man who said he would hang up his racing gloves this year instead took another win for the red livery team, and another 25 points to boot on the championship log. And in Botswana, the spectators really let it all hang out. They certainly enjoyed their motorsport and gave a spirited performance all of their own. Grobler and Jordan have obviously got used to removing those corks in the last 2 seasons or so. The Harpers were overjoyed with their second win, and it proved that their high level of physical fitness and a great car prep was paying off, especially on the longer events. But the Motorrad squad was as always present and all accounted for. Their consistency was proving to be a thorn in the flesh for the other teams. So in the third race of the 06 season, there was a massive 40-minute production car winning margin for the Nissan lads and lasses to celebrate. Only one Ford, that of Schroeder and Huxtable, cracked the top 10. And in one big win, the Nissan Dio had 20 points to spare over the Ford team, with the rest already relegated to also Rams. In the special vehicle class, the father and son combination enjoyed the spoils of victory, while Cox and ter Steege ensured that a Motorrad Bat again featured in the top 2 for the 3rd race meet in a row. And that performance also secured a big jump up the board for Cox and ter Steege, who leaped from 6th to 3rd and right into championship contention. Grobler, as always, enjoyed the crowd support, and with a halfway mark beckoning, would have been smiling inwardly too with one eye on the championship already.